I never really liked this house. Not since I moved in, anyway. It always felt off, cold, even in summer. I'd lived here for 3 years before I found it. 3 years of walking past that same stretch of wall in the basement every single day. It was behind the old furnace, tucked away, almost impossible to see unless you were really looking. I was trying to fix a leaky pipe, cursing under my breath, when my hand brushed against something loose. Not plaster, not wood, metal. A small, almost invisible seam. It took me hours, prying and scraping, until a section of the wall slowly, reluctantly gave way. The air that rushed out wasn't just cold, it was dead, stale, heavy, like a tomb. And the darkness beyond, it wasn't just the absence of light. It felt like an absence of everything good. My flashlight beam cut through the black, and that's when I saw it. My flashlight beam cut through the black, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a pile of bones or some grotesque idol. It was a room. A small, square room, barely larger than a walk-in closet, carved out of the earth itself. The walls were uneven, rough-hewn concrete, still damp in places, glistening faintly in the weak light. The floor was just packed dirt, dark and undisturbed. But it wasn't empty. In the very center, facing the far wall, stood a single, rusted metal chair. An old, utilitarian thing, like something you'd find in a forgotten schoolhouse or a derelict factory. It sat there, perfectly still, perfectly centered, as if waiting. My breath hitched. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, suffocating silence. What was this place? Who built it? And why was there a chair facing a blank wall in a hidden room beneath my house? Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, to seal the opening, to pretend I'd never found it. But a colder, more insidious curiosity rooted me to the spot. My hand, still gripping the flashlight, trembled violently. The air, which had felt merely stale before, now felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't name. A palpable sense of despair, perhaps, or a lingering echo of something truly awful. I took a hesitant step, then another, my boots crunching softly on the basement floor. The beam of light danced across the chair, illuminating the flaky rust, the worn seat. It looked used. Not just old, but used. A shiver traced its way down my spine. My gaze drifted from the chair to the wall it faced, and that's when I saw them. Not symbols, not writing. Scratches. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of thin, frantic lines etched into the rough concrete. Some were deep, gouged out, others fainter, overlapping, crisscrossing like a madman's doodle. They weren't random. They seemed to radiate outwards from a central point, exactly where someone sitting in that chair would be looking. My stomach lurched. My mind, desperate to rationalize, tried to conjure images of bored children or a previous owner with a strange hobby. But the sheer volume, the desperate intensity of those marks, it spoke of something far more sinister. I knelt, my knees protesting on the cold concrete, shining the light closer to the floor directly beneath the chair. And there it was, a dark, irregular stain about the size of a dinner plate pressed into the dirt. It was dry, ancient, but unmistakably blood, or something that had once been blood. The color was a deep, unsettling reddish brown, almost black in the dim light. It seeped into the earth, a permanent scar. The air grew even heavier, pressing in on me. I could almost hear the faint, desperate scraping sounds, feel the frantic energy that had once filled this tiny, forgotten space. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the ghosts of those scratches, the unspoken terror that had soaked into the very ground. I wasn't alone, not truly. Someone had been here, trapped, and they had left their mark. A cold, prickling sensation spread across my skin, as if unseen eyes were now watching me from the darkness just beyond the flashlight's reach. I felt a terrible, suffocating dread. This wasn't just a hidden room, this was a tomb, or worse, a cage, and I had just opened it. The cold, prickling sensation intensified, crawling over my skin like 1,000 tiny spiders. My breath caught in my throat, a dry, rasping sound that echoed far too loudly in the oppressive silence. The blood stain, it wasn't just a stain, it was a testament, a silent scream frozen in time. My flashlight beam, still clutched in my trembling hand, danced wildly, illuminating the rough concrete, the packed earth, the rusted chair. Every surface seemed to hum with a terrible residual energy. I could almost feel the phantom weight of a body in that chair, the desperate thrashing, the raw terror. My mind reeled, trying to process the sheer depravity of what this room implied. Someone had been held here, someone had suffered, and they had left their mark, not just on the wall, but on the very fabric of this forgotten space. I wanted to run. Every fiber of my being screamed for escape, for the safety of the world above, for the bright, clean air that felt 1,000,000 miles away. But I couldn't move. It was as if an invisible tether held me, a morbid fascination mixed with a paralyzing fear. I felt a profound sense of intrusion, of having stumbled into a sacred, horrific secret. I forced myself to look closer at the scratches again. They weren't uniform. Some were shallow, almost tentative. Others were deep, gouged so fiercely into the concrete that tiny flakes of aggregate had broken free, scattering on the dirt floor. My light caught a glint, a tiny, almost imperceptible sparkle among the dust and debris near the base of the wall. I leaned in, my heart pounding, a cold sweat beating on my forehead. It was a fingernail, or what was left of one. Brittle, discolored, a sliver of keratin, unmistakable. It had been torn, not clipped. A desperate, final act of futile resistance. A choked sound escaped my lips. This wasn't just speculation anymore. This was tangible, horrifying proof. The air felt thick, heavy, as if the very oxygen was being consumed by the weight of past agony. I could almost hear the faint, ragged breathing, the muffled cries, the slow, agonizing descent into despair. My own breath hitched, ragged and shallow. I felt lightheaded, a dizzying nausea swirling in my gut. The walls seemed to press in, the darkness beyond my small circle of light feeling more menacing, more alive than before. Then, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. A whisper? No, not a whisper. It was more like a subtle shift in the air, a cold draft that brushed against my cheek, even though the room was sealed. It carried with it a faint, metallic tang, like old blood and rust, but also something else, something sickly sweet, cloying, a smell that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the claustrophobic space. Nothing, just the rough walls, the empty chair, the silent, gaping maw of the entrance I had created. But the feeling persisted. That cold touch, that awful scent. It wasn't just an echo anymore. It felt like a presence. A lingering, malevolent energy that had been disturbed, awakened. I felt eyes on me, not just imagined, but truly felt. Pinpricks of ice on my back, a pressure on my chest. I wasn't alone in the room, not anymore. I had opened the cage, and whatever had been contained within, whatever had been left behind, was now aware of me, and it was here. My lungs burned, desperate for air, but I couldn't draw a full breath. The gasp was ragged, choked. My body locked up, every muscle rigid, screaming at me to move, to flee, but I was utterly paralyzed.
The flashlight beam, still clutched in my trembling hand, became a frantic, erratic pendulum, sweeping across the rough concrete walls, the dirt floor, the empty, rusted chair. Nothing. There was nothing there. Just shadows that dance and stretch, morphing into grotesque shapes at the edge of my vision, only to vanish when the light hit them directly. My eyes darted back and forth, desperate, searching for any visual confirmation, any outline, any flicker in the oppressive darkness. But the feeling didn't subside. If anything, it intensified.
The air around me felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it even harder to breathe. The cold wasn't just on my skin, it seeped into my bones, a deep, penetrating chill that made my teeth chatter involuntarily. And that smell, that sickly, sweet, cloying odor, like decay masked by something artificial, grew stronger, filling my nostrils, making me gag. It was right here, I knew it. Not a ghost in the traditional sense, perhaps, but a concentrated echo of suffering, a malevolent imprint so potent it had gained a terrifying sentience. A deep, profound despair washed over me then, sudden and overwhelming, like a physical blow to the gut. It wasn't my despair, it was alien, ancient, a residue of the agony that had stained this room. It threatened to crush me, to steal my will, to make me sink to my knees in hopeless surrender. I fought it, a silent, desperate battle within my own mind, clenching my jaw so hard my head throbbed. I had to get out, I had to. My gaze snapped back to the chair, then to the wall covered in scratches, the fingernail. The torn, discolored sliver of keratin I had seen just moments before. It was still there, lying on the dirt near the base of the wall. But as my flashlight beam lingered on it, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the air. And then, slowly, agonizingly, the fingernail began to move. Not slide, not roll. It vibrated, almost imperceptibly at first, then it lifted, just a fraction of an inch from the dirt, as if drawn by an invisible thread. It hovered there, suspended in the air, directly in the path of my light. My blood ran cold. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't an echo. This was real. A guttural sound, half gasp, half whimper, tore from my throat. The fingernail, still suspended, began to rotate slowly, deliberately, until the jagged, torn edge was pointing directly at me. It felt like an accusation, a silent, horrifying message from the past, from the one who had left it behind. The presence was no longer just aware of me, it was interacting. It was showing me what it was capable of, reminding me of the agony it represented. My legs finally unlocked, but not to run. Instead, I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, landing hard on the damp concrete floor with a sickening thud. The flashlight flew from my hand, clattering against the wall, its beam now pointing erratically upwards, casting wild, dancing shadows across the ceiling. Darkness engulfed me, broken only by the sporadic, disorienting flashes of the fallen light. I scrambled backward on my hands and knees, desperate to reach the opening, the only way out. But the darkness was no longer just an absence of light. It was alive. It was watching, and I could feel it reaching for me. A cold, spectral hand seemed to brush against my ankle, sending a jolt of pure terror straight through my body. I screamed, a raw, animalistic sound that was swallowed almost immediately by the crushing silence of the hidden room. The scream tore from my throat, a primal, desperate sound, but it died instantly, suffocated by the heavy, suffocating silence of that tomb. My ankle. The touch wasn't just cold, it was bone-chilling, a cloying, icy grip that felt impossibly strong, impossibly real. It wasn't merely a brush, it was a firm, possessive hold, tightening around my leg. A jolt of agonizing cold shot up my spine, freezing my blood in my veins. I thrashed, kicking out with my free leg, trying to dislodge whatever had seized me, but it held fast. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, deafening drumbeat that echoed in my ears, drowning out everything else. The darkness was absolute now, broken only by the erratic, disorienting flashes from the fallen flashlight, which lay somewhere near the ceiling, its beams sweeping across the rough concrete in wild, nauseating arcs. Each flash was a jolt of terror, revealing fleeting, distorted glimpses. The rusted chair, momentarily illuminated, appearing to lurch forward. The scratches on the wall, morphing into writhing skeletal hands in the fractured light. And the entrance, my only way out, seeming to shrink with every passing second. But in the moments between the flashes, the darkness was a living, breathing entity, pressing in, suffocating me. A tangible presence that felt like a shroud being pulled tighter and tighter around my head. The sickly sweet smell intensified, thick and pungent, filling my mouth, my nose, my lungs, making me gag uncontrollably. It was the smell of decay, yes, but also something else. Something metallic and sharp, like fresh blood, overlaid with a cloying perfume, a desperate attempt to mask the horror beneath. It was the smell of forgotten suffering, of a life extinguished in agony. And it was all around me, emanating from the very air I was trying so desperately to breathe. My breath hitched, a series of shallow, ragged gasps. The grip on my ankle tightened further, the icy cold spreading, climbing up my calf, my knee, a creeping numbness that threatened to immobilize my entire leg. I could feel the individual spectral fingers pressing into my flesh, cold and unyielding, like a hand made of ice gripping my bones. It wasn't just a touch, it was a declaration. I was not alone, and whatever was here, it was physical enough to hold me. A low, guttural sound, not from me, but from the darkness itself, seemed to rumble through the packed earth floor, vibrating up through my body. It wasn't a voice, not a language, but a sound of immense, ancient pain. A deep, resonating moan that spoke of centuries of despair. It was the wail of the trapped, the echo of the tormented.
And it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, seeming to originate from the very walls, from the very air. My eyes, wide and useless in the pitch black, strained to see, to make sense of the chaos. The intermittent flashes of the flashlight were more hindrance than help now, disorienting me, making the shadows dance like malevolent spirits. In one particularly long flash, as the beam swept across the floor directly in front of me, I saw it. Not a full figure, not a face, but a shimmering, translucent outline, a distortion in the air itself, coalescing just inches from my face. It was vaguely humanoid, tall and gaunt, its edges indistinct, like heat rising from asphalt, but its intention was undeniably clear. Its head, or what I perceived as its head, tilted, and I felt a sudden, intense pressure, as if unseen eyes were boring into my very soul. The despair I had felt earlier, that alien, ancient sorrow, now intensified 1,000-fold, crashing over me like a tidal wave. It was an intentional assault, a psychic blow designed to break my will, to strip away all hope, to prepare me for whatever came next. I felt my own thoughts, my own sense of self beginning to fray at the edges, dissolving under the relentless onslaught of its pure, concentrated misery. Then a new sensation,
A burning, searing pain erupted on my ankle where the spectral hand was clamped. It wasn't just cold anymore. It was like being branded with ice, a deep internal ache that made me cry out again, a choked whimper this time. The smell of fresh blood, that metallic tang, grew sharper, and a new, horrifying realization dawned on me. The fingernail, the one I had seen earlier, hovering. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a piece of it, a fragment of its agony, a tool. The translucent shape before me seemed to lean in closer, and I felt a faint, cold breath on my face, carrying with it that sickening sweet scent. The rumble in the earth intensified, and the very air around me grew heavy, vibrating with a malevolent energy. I could feel its presence, overwhelming, all-consuming. It was here, it was real, and it was not letting me go. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer terror, the overwhelming despair. I thrashed again with every ounce of strength I had left, screaming wordlessly, a desperate, animalistic struggle against an unseen, unstoppable force. My fingers scrabbled at the damp concrete, searching for purchase, anything to push myself away, to break free. But the grip on my ankle was like iron, and the overwhelming presence was suffocating me, stealing my will, my breath, my very life force. The flashlight, in one final dying flicker, cast a brief, stark illumination across the wall directly opposite me.
And there, etched among the countless scratches, almost invisible until now, were two words, gouged deeper than all the rest, standing out like a brand. Not by the trapped, not by the victim, but by the one who had waited. Two words, chillingly clear, burned into my retina in that fleeting moment of light before the darkness swallowed everything whole once more. You're next. Then, the cold, spectral hand began to drag me, slowly, inexorably, towards the rusted chair. The grip on my ankle tightened, an icy vice, pulling me, dragging me across the damp earth. The rusted chair loomed, a silent, mocking throne awaiting its next victim. My fingernails tore at the concrete, my raw screams echoing, swallowed by the suffocating darkness. I thrashed, kicked, a desperate animal caught in a trap. The burning pain in my ankle intensifying, spreading like venom. I saw the chair, closer now, its dark silhouette against the intermittent flashes of the dying flashlight. I could almost feel its cold metal on my skin. Just as my head was about to strike the seat, a surge, a primal, unthinking burst of adrenaline ripped through me. I don't know how, I don't know why, but in that instant I twisted, a desperate, final contortion. The spectral grip, for a fleeting moment, seemed to loosen, to waver, as if surprised by my resistance. It was all I needed. I scrambled, clawed, propelled by sheer, unadulterated terror, back towards the opening. I don't remember climbing out. I don't remember sealing the wall. Only a blur of frantic, bloodied hands, the desperate clatter of tools, the raw, guttural sobs tearing from my throat. I just know that when the sun finally rose, I was huddled in the furthest corner of my living room, shivering, my body bruised and aching, my mind a shattered mess. The basement door was locked, bolted, reinforced with everything I could find. I still live in this house. I can't leave. It feels like I'm bound to it now. The air is always cold, no matter the season, and the silence is never truly silent. I hear things. Scratches, sometimes, faint and distant from beneath the floorboards. Sometimes the faint, sickly sweet smell drifts up, a ghostly reminder of what lies below. I know I'm living on borrowed time. The words, "You're next," are etched not just on that wall, but into my very soul. They are a promise, a chilling prophecy. I sleep with the lights on, every night. I check the basement door a dozen times a day. I try to make sense of it,
But there is no sense to be made, only dread. Have you ever found something hidden in your home? Something that wasn't meant to be found? Something that watched you back? Be careful what you uncover. Some secrets are better left buried, because once you've opened that door, you can never truly close it again.